In today's video, we will cover up the topic of diffusion. Many substances can dissolve in water because there are tiny spaces between the water molecules that allow particles like sugar or salt to break apart and then spread out. Well, this is called diffusion. Now, for example, uh, you have this beaker, let's say, okay, or you have this test tube, okay. Now you have water in here, so these are the water molecules. And if you place a purple crystal right here, now what will happen is at first the molecules were concentrated over here, right? So they were concentrated in just one place. But slowly, after a few minutes or about an hour, you can see that some of the purple molecules are starting to spread out as well. So you can think of these as the purple molecules. And around after 24 hours, you will see that they have completely dissolved in that test tube, which has water in it. So this is one famous example of diffusion. Now let us learn about three things: a solution, a solute, and a solvent. So what are these? Well, a solution is made up of solute and solvent. But what are solute and solvent, right? So solute is the thing that dissolves in the solvent. Now let us look in one example. Let's have water for this example. So you have this beaker and there is the water. So let's draw the water molecules. So these are the H2O molecules. Okay. Now, this is the solvent in our example. So you have salt with you right now. So what you do is you take yourself a spoon, and what you do is you place all the salt in here and you let it diffuse around the water. They spread apart, which is diffusion. So as after they spread apart, you can say that this is the solvent and you have created a solution that is pretty salty. Now again, we are looking into a beaker full of water. Now over here, these are the salt molecules. Now what we see over here is what we call a dilute solution. Now what really is a dilute solution? A dilute solution has a really small amount of solute dissolved in a solvent. Now let us ask this question: which one of these is the solute? Well, the solute is obviously the salt. And which one is the solvent? Well, obviously it is the water molecules or water. Yeah, let's just say that in simple words. Now, what if we do the exact opposite? What if you just kept on adding little by little more salt into this mixture? Well, what if you have created what we call a concentrated solution? A concentrated solution. So from here we can easily understand that a concentrated solution has a lot of solute dissolved in the solvent. So this is the dilute solution and concentrated solution. Another example would be when you spray perfume in your room, the particles spread out evenly throughout the room by diffusion. So from all of that knowledge, let us answer the question, what is the exact meaning of diffusion? Well, diffusion is the movement of particles going from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Now, one thing you also have to know is that they do it until they are spread out evenly. So yeah, this definition does make sense because in the first example we gave, we had this test tube where there was a purple crystal and this was very, very concentrated. So as you can see, it went from an area of high concentration to slowly to an area of low concentration until it was spread out evenly in around 24 hours. So biology is about life. But where is life in this topic? Now let us move on to that. You see, your cells need food and oxygen for respiration, and these are carried to our cells in blood. These molecules diffuse out of the blood and into the cells. As cells use up these molecules, waste is created, and that waste is diffused out of the cell and into the blood. Well, let us look into that. So you have this cell over here, and what happens is that your blood carries all the things you need for respiration, which are, I've already mentioned before, oxygen and food. So it carries all the nutrients and oxygen, and then what happens is those nutrients, they diffuse into the cell. And when waste is created after using these molecules up, what happens is the waste then diffuses out of the cells and into our blood. So now let's look into osmosis, and this information will be helpful in the following moments to understand how it really diffuses in and diffuses out of the cell. So we know that cell membrane separates the contents of the cell from the outside. We have already discussed that in our previous video. So if you want to check that out, it's right over here. Please click it if you really want to know about cells, or if you don't have much of an idea about it. We covered a lot there. So we know that if you have a cell here, there's this membrane that it has, which separates the contents inside of that cell from the outside of the cell. Now there's a catch. You see, the cell membrane, it also allows small particles to pass through. Well, that cell membrane is partially permeable. So you can think of it like this. So we are looking into one part of the cell membrane. So suppose these are the particles we're talking about. This one is too big to fit in, so it does not. But you see some small, my bad. So, but some small particles can actually fit in and they go inside of the cell. So yeah, cell membranes are partially permeable. So, well, with that knowledge, let us answer the question, what is osmosis? So, you can say that it is a special kind of movement. Yeah, again, we're using the word movement because it, involves diffusion. Well, it is a special kind involves water molecules, that involves water molecules to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Now there's a catch. This happens through the partially permeable membrane we already talked about. So it's the partially permeable membrane. Still hard to understand this? Well, let us look into an example. So you have this cell right here, and this is the partially permeable membrane. I'm so tired of writing it every single time. So partially permeable. You know what? Just remember the word, Yeah, I've already written halfway through, but just remember it, okay? So this is the partially permeable membrane. Now, the thing is, inside of that cell, what happens is that there is a lot of water molecules, let's say. Okay, so that is quite a lot of water molecules. And let's say that these are the solute molecules. Maybe I have drawn a bit too much. Let's just remove a few of them. So yeah, okay. So these are the solute molecules. Now, just like the inside, there's also the same solute molecules outside, but the only catch is that there is a lot compared to the cell, to the insides of the cell. And just like the insides of the cell again, there's also these water molecules, but the only catch is that there is a bit too less compared to the one on the inside. Now let me ask you this question: which one do you think is the dilute solution and which one do you think is the concentrated solution? Well, obviously, the answer is that this one right here is the concentrated solution, and this one is the dilute solution. Now, obviously, there's going to be diffusion, but in this case, we will call this what we just learned, and it is osmosis. So there, as I've already told you earlier, to remember that this one is the partially permeable membrane. So yeah, what happens is that these solute molecules, they move from this area of high concentration and they move into this area of lower concentration. So you see, they will move through the partially permeable membrane, and yeah, they will do it until they're spread out even. Now, as we already know about osmosis, now let's learn more about it. Let's learn about osmosis in plants and also in animals. But first off, the osmosis in plants. Now we have to know about turgidity, the term turgidity. Now, what really is turgidity? When plant cells are placed in water, for example, so this one is the plant cell. Well, yeah, we can't keep it that big. So, yeah, for example, this one is the plant cell right there. So, yeah, when you place it in a jar of or a beaker of water, so what happens is that they swell up. So this swells up into a larger one. And why? Because after all, inside of that cell, it has something we already learned about in the previous video, cell sap. And that cell sap is a really strong solution. It contains a really strong solution, and for this reason, due to osmosis, it swells up and ultimately it blows up. And we can say the cell sap, by the way, the cell sap blows up. Okay, so we can say that the cell is turgid. Now, another term we have to know about is flaccid. Now, what does flaccid mean? So, we have that same cell, but the only catch is that the plant cell is placed in a really strong solution. So, okay, I would say that, yeah, in a really strong solution. So, you can think that these are the solute particles. So yeah, this is a pretty strong solution. This is a concentrated solution. Okay, so what happens is, again, by the laws of osmosis, it causes it to shrink. So it pretty much shrinks down, and we can say that the cell is flaccid. The cells have plasmolized. So this is a pretty important term. We can call this thing plasmolysis. Now let us go through osmosis in animal cells. So let us look into this red blood cell. So as we have already mentioned in the other video, they're a bit hollow over here, which is a biconcave shape, which gives it more and more surface area so that it can diffuse better. So you see, yeah, it does that because of osmosis. So the red blood cell we have here is what you can say that it is placed in a in distilled water. So yeah, it's just normal water. Now the cytoplasm of this red blood cell has a really strong solution, and I hope you've already guessed what will happen. It will, just like the plant cell we discussed earlier, it will blow up just like a balloon. And yeah, they burst. And we call this process hemolysis. So yeah, ultimately they just blow up and they just, burst. Now, one last thing we will look into in today's video is what we call active transport. Now, what is active transport? So, it is the uptake of particles by a cell against the concentration gradient. So, what do we know about diffusion? So we know that the particles go from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. But in active transport, they move from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Yeah, against the concentration gradient. It transitions from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. And for this, as this is going against the concentration gradient, active transport also needs energy. Now, if this video helped you, please do not forget to like this video, and of course subscribe, because it will help me out as a really small creator that is just trying to get out to people so that they can learn. And yeah, watch these videos. I do not know that what they are, but YouTube thinks that you really should watch them. Goodbye.